We talked in yesterday's video about the Nike Air Force One electric green and how there's a whole heap to do with recycled elements wrapping up with standard elements and balancing that whole quality control between the recycled stuff and the standard kind of OG quality stuff while also having a very cool sneaker. And then I mentioned in that video there's also an Air Max 90 out there that looks very similar. So yesterday it was the Air Force One electric green and today it's the Nike Air Max 90 NRG Court Purple. Now it seems if you looked at that on paper you'd be like these two shoes have nothing in common, Court Purple versus electric green, but they look very similar, so I was like you know, I'm going to look at that and see if there are some tie-ups between these shoes. I haven't been able to find anywhere where it's officially tying them together as a pack, but I just can't get away from the ties between the two shoes. Not only do they look similar, not only is their story very similar about recycled materials and standard materials side by side, and those recycled materials are very close to each other in style, but there's also elements on the shoes that are just identical, the exact same swooshes, and then also some electric green hits on both, even though it's the Air Force One that's called electric green, and these guys for some reason are called Court Purple, and we'll get into that as well. So there's a lot to talk about in today's video as we take a close-up look at the upcoming release of the Nike Air Max 90 NRG Court Purple. This is the Tokyo Butter 23 Sneaker Channel. Tokyo Butter 23 Sneaker Channel des.毎日アップするので毎日見てください. Every single day from Tokyo, Japan, I bring you content about upcoming sneaker releases, sneaker news, and sneaker reviews. And today we have that Nike Air Max 90 Court Purple in the spotlights. Now, you guys know if you watch my videos that I research every single one of them and find out as much as I can about a shoe before bringing it to you every single day. Now, that's not easy to do when you have a full-time job and a family and stuff like that, doing daily drops on YouTube. But I still managed to do it, and I always, you know, write up my research as well. It's not just memorized, it's written up, so basically because it's easier for me to remember stuff I've typed than just stuff I've read. And one of the things I wrote about these guys was Air Max 90 NRG Court Purple. I'm like, it's like a mashup of a bunch of different shoes. Of course Air Max, but Court Purple to me says Air Jordan 1. As soon as I hear Court Purple I think Air Jordan 1. I'm not thinking anything else, so that's a big kind of like interesting play on there. But then you've got the NRG element as well, because that's a strand of Air Max 90s which gives you a bit more premium, a bit more quality as well. And then there are hits of other shoes like the Canvas Recycle Pack that came recently, earlier in the year, which was 5 silhouettes, 6 colorways earlier in the year. So there's a bunch of different stuff all sort of cramming it together. And we talked about that in yesterday's video about how this move to zero initiative at Nike to try and get more recycled elements in their shoes, it feels like to me that they've really experimented throughout the summer with the recycle element of their shoes. And these shoes, yesterday's Air Force One and today's Air Max 90, feels like the point when they've really understood where the balance between recycle and OG quality control goes, and they finally kind of nailed that. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at, you know, the shoe, the detail and stuff like that, looking at why it's called Court Purple and a couple of places where that comes in, looking at the materials, but also tying it back to yesterday's Air Force One with certain points that parallel between the two shoes and tell you there's more about these two shoes being together than being apart. So without further ado, let's get into that. We're going to look at the tie-ups with the Air Force Ones first, I think, and the big tie-up comes on the swoosh. So let's get in on that swoosh on these Air Max 90s. It's a red swoosh, pastel red, and the stitching around it is important. We'll get to the Air Force One in a second, but the pastel red stitching and pastel red swoosh with the blue stitching is the kind of signature design feature between the two shoes. But when you get in on that stitching on the Air Max 90, you can see it's very sort of simple and low key, whereas the pastel red swoosh itself is very sort of loud and popping. But then if we flip that back to yesterday's Air Force Ones, you'll be able to see that it is the same pastel red swoosh, but the stitching on yesterday's Air Force Ones was a big sort of out there oversized stitching feel to it in that same sort of deep blue. And then if we come back to today's shoe, you can see that they've lessened the impact of the stitching, but they've still gone there with that same color of swoosh in the same kind of recycled materials. And then it's not too far to go down to the classic Air Max 90 branding panel on the side that you always get just behind the midfoot, round about, mid-height on the shoe. And you can see it zoomed in on here. And what you might not have noticed until now is that it's in an electric green, if I can say that, in the colorway. And then we go back to yesterday's Air Force One, that swoosh, little swoosh on the toe box there, which gave it that electric green name. And that's another tie between the two shoes, back to today's Air Max 90 and that little branding panel. So I can't get away from the tie-ups between the two shoes. And we'll finish that tie-ups by looking at the bottom of the lacing system, because that's an interesting little panel there. I remember looking at it with like the reserve, I think it was the reverse duck camos. It was actually an important little detail between all the different, the green duck camos, the original duck camos, the reverse duck camos. That little panel at the bottom of the lacing system played a story throughout all the duck camo sort of line. There's about 4 different shoes in there. And then today it plays an important feature because it matches the swoosh in that pastel red color. But not only that, what looks like a piece of sort of thread hanging out, uncut, sort of unfinished on the shoe when you zoom in on it, is actually a very small electric green swoosh. And again, there's that tie up to yesterday's Air Force One. So I just can't get away from the possibility that these two shoes are a pack, even though I haven't read that anywhere yet. But maybe as we get closer to the drop date, which we don't know if it's November the 24th or December the 1st, but as we get closer to the drop date, you'll maybe get more details about these shoes and whether they're a pack or they're two standalone. Now let's go back from that little swoosh, cute little swoosh at the bottom of the lacing system, and go up to the branding on the top of the tongue. Very, very simple branding up there in a white tongue, white branding panel, and then the Nike swoosh in purple for that court purple feel on these shoes. And it's one of the few places where you've got purple really popping off the shoe, and it just doesn't make much sense to me to call it court purple. I'd be very surprised if these actually make it into production with that name, but I might be wrong. But yes, up at the top of the tongue, white branding panel, purple Nike swoosh branding up there to give you that court purple. And then if you go around to the back of these guys, your bog standard Air Max 90 branding on the back, that interesting kind of almost hexagonal branding panel there. Again, I think we're looking at purple. I don't think it's black, I think it's purple, but you'll be able to tell better than me on the green screen. And then the Nike swoosh Air branding in white on there for nice contrast. So we've got a couple of hits of purple in there, but it's just not, I can't say court purple for me. And then the final two places to look for purple is if we go down to the air unit on the side. Now this is a place that could have been purple with the wraparound of the air unit being in purple, but they went with, I think it's white, I don't think it's light grey. But if you actually look into the air unit, you can see purple on the inside. But again, it's subdued. It's not like in your face court purple, it's sort of hidden in the middle of the shoe. And then the sort of main hit of purple comes on the outsole, which is a two-tone outsole. But it just, to me, I don't know, like yesterday it was electric green and there was only one tiny little sort of tie up to that little green swoosh on the front end of the shoe that was matched on the tongue branding. And yesterday's shoes, I'm like, don't know if that's electric green. And then today you've got a couple of little sort of purpley bits in there, so calling it court purple is a bit, I don't know, it's a bit of a stretch for me. So I wouldn't be surprised if these two shoes, the Air Force One from yesterday and the Air Max 90 from today, and I forgot to mention the Air Max 90's 30th anniversary year, and that's one of the main reasons we're getting these high quality NRG sneakers and stuff like that, is because of the 30th anniversary year. But yeah, there's not much purple in there, so I think you're probably going to see the recycle pack or something like that to name these two shoes as one pack, as we get closer to that drop date and to that official release of these guys. Okay, looking back out the whole shoe, pale sort of grey shoe, pale colours, which helps the pastel red to jump off at you. Again, if your backdrop is pale green, not green, grey, it would be very easy to put a lot of purple on there if you want to call it a court purple shoe. But that's just me. I might be wrong about it being called court purple, or I might be wrong about how much purple there needs to be on a shoe for it to be court purple. But it doesn't really matter what you call it. What matters is how does it look, and it looks really good, and it's got that recycle element in where they're trying to get to 80% recycled materials on their shoes, which is a great thing to do, so we appreciate Nike for doing that. Okay, it's time for me to sign off. Thank you guys for checking out the content. I'm getting close to that 2-year anniversary of daily drops on YouTube. We're very close, maybe 2 weeks away from that, so keeping on going with these daily drops. Hard work, but somebody's got to do it. With that being said, time for me to sign off. And the only thing left for me to do is do what I do at the end of every single video, which is remind you that I do this every single day. And that means that you are guaranteed to see me tomorrow.